Hi everyone, I'm Dilina. So today I'll be talking about this. First of all, thank you very much, for giving me this opportunity. And before starting, I must let you know this is one of my most exciting crisis because I'm in the presentation. So I happen to be selected to do Bachelor of Design in Mumbai University by accident. So I didn't know until that I come to university that also the people that I'm meeting you. So I performed well, but I realized like I'm not enjoying many things. You know, people who are like I'm really passionate with my batchmates who are doing things, making things. Unlike them, I was more curious about asking questions. For instance, when it comes to a design project, one of my favorite part is going to the field, talking to people, living in the community, etc. And so, somewhere in the middle of the journey, I realized, okay, I should not call myself a designer. And there was a great period that I didn't call myself anything. And now I like to call myself, okay, if you really want to put a label, please use the design researcher. Because at the part I started doing sociology and then science and technology studies, different areas which allow you to like live with people, study them, why do they do art, why do they design, etc. Right? So in this case, I don't have much to show as in creations, but I will give you a lot of questions to take home, ideally. So I would say as researchers, we are in the business of questions. So to talk about this very interesting dialogue that Munia put forward, designing our nation, I'm going to use this same few words to talk about. Right? So to begin with, the way I usually start is that I believe all the words have sort of agency within the sentence. If you take this sentence, designing our nation, the word design itself doing something to the nation. And the word itself, nation, is doing something to design our everything. The best way to know what is replacement. Right? So what if imagine this is not SLDF, but SLDF. And apparently an engineer. And he's inviting us to this question on engineering our nation. Right? So would you be more interested?
Sorry about this, but last minute. Right? Thank you.
So, if it is engineering our nation, would you be more interested than designing our nation? Or else, what if building our nation, crafting our nation is, just give few seconds, right, in your head. If it is crafting our nation, what would be the image you make? Like, what would be the process? How you would start crafting the nation as opposed to designing the nation, engineering the nation, right? Or else healing the nation. So, is our nation more better to be healed, or better to be engineered, or better to be craft, right? So, or else reclaiming our nation. What if selling our nation? Do you have any resistance to that word? Like, if we do a dialogue on selling our nation, would it be a different hierarchy as opposed to engineering our nation, crafting our nation? What would happen in your head? That is the exact agency in the word design right now, right? So just keep open that tab, right? And then I will pose my first question, right? So I will showcase series of questions related to the topic presented by Monia, right? The first question is, instead of rushing to design our nation, let's have few minutes to talk about what we talk when we talk about designing our nation. So I'm just borrowing this topic from Haruki Murakami, who borrowed it from another short story, what we talk when we talk about love, right? So Haruki Murakami wrote a book called What I Talk When I Talk About Running. I really love that play around the word, so I just borrowed it. Here also what I'm trying to do is to pose few questions on what we talk about when we talk about designing our nation, right? So now we will move into the next part. So we change the word designing, try different verbs to understand what it does, and now I'm going to change the nation part, right? So forget about the nation, right? Now imagine I'm telling designing our logo. What would be the first action you would imagine, right? How big the process is, how many people you are mentally involving in that image, right? Or else what if designing our product, designing our space, designing our system? If you really look into your mind, every time you change the word, your mental image changes, right? It's not the same mental image that we are talking about, right? So this is very important thing. So when Muniak inviting to talk about designing our nation, we need to think about like what is exactly nation to be designed? What is the exact mental picture of the nation in order to design, right? So that is one of my main questions. To design, what is the shape of the nation, right? So in order to design something, for instance, I ask you to design a chair, design a logo, you know how it looks, a service, experience, everything. But if I ask what is the shape of a nation or what it consists, it's a little bit of a tricky thing, right? So instead of not talking about what the shape of it, rushing to designing is a bit of a trickier business, right? So I will tell why it is important. So the research area that I am coming from, it's kind of a multidisciplinary area where sociologists, information designers, science and technology studies people coming together in order to understand complex social phenomena. So usually within our labs, for instance, density design lab in Politecnico di Milano, Science Po in France, Interaction Design Center that I work, all are targeted on not designing but explaining, describing complex things so anyone else could better intervene, do better policies. So our whole target is like studying the complexity and presenting it, right? So I'm doing the same business here, right? So when you speak well about something, you get to design better, you get to make better policies, right? Because you see a clearer picture about the phenomenon you are going to design, right? I'm not going to here describe the nation, but instead of pose more questions, right? So for you to have a better idea about the shape of a nation, I will share a few personal experiences. Some are theoretical, some are one of my personal experiences that I had to have a better discussion, right? Number one is, nation is a construction, right? So as this, the Cult of Nation book saying, today the concept of nation seems so natural that the fact that it is relatively recent origin has gone virtually unnoticed. So if you really think, the concept of nation building is not that old. It was linked to French Revolution, American independence, etc., where they tried to come up with a term that would allow them to fight against empires, colonization, etc. So it's a fairly new concept, right? And at the same time, the nation is not fake or made out of thin air. It's a continuum. There are certain parts that coming from the past that they collected to build it. So it's not magic or Aladdin's lamp kind of a thing, but it's a construction of things that already existed. There is a continuum, there is a metamorphic, right? So then the third one, right? The third one is the concept of nation building is modern, and therefore it has these faults that comes with modernity, right? So if you really think modernity, or what we call as modern time period, the essence of modernity is it really likes to purify things, right? If you recall design history, at certain stage architecture started to say, okay, this is function, this is aesthetic. Aesthetic and function cannot go hand to hand together. If you are doing a design, you need to address functionality. And if it is economy, it is the sharp divide between economy and science. Science and art, those cannot be go together, cannot be overlapped, right? So this is the essence of modernity, which also you could see in nation, the shape of the nation, right? So those are the first 3 insights that I want to share, but to better describe it or to tell that how I really internalized this, all these things that I was exposed in my sociology masters, but you know, there are certain things in your life, you theoretically learn it, but there is a second time that you again realize with one of your personal experiences. So all these 3 things happen to have a nice personal experience which gave me the proper internalization. That was when I was doing my research in Turkey, right? So I did ethnographic studies with Turkish journalists for like 7 to 8 months. So I got to technically live with them. Like I was shadowing a lot of journalists from morning to day, which means I take the metro with them, stay with them wherever they go. I speak with them. So I made a good connection with them, which they started to talk about their nation, etc., and got a lot of local insights, right? So Turkey is an interesting case for these 3 insights. To begin with, in 1928, Turkey took a national policy to change its scriptures from Arabic Persian to Latin American, right? So they decided, the modern Turkey, okay, from today onward, we are not going to write from our old scriptures, we're going to change it for Latin American scriptures, Latin scriptures. So it was a very strategic decision, because at that time Atatürk wanted to position their nation more closer to Europe, because Turkey is a transcontinental country. It has certain part in Europe and it has certain part in Asia. So Atatürk, the modern father of modern Turkey, decided to go for this national policy which allowed Turkey to be positioned slightly closer to Europe, right? So when I heard that decision and how it happened, this was the exact moment I realized, okay, nation is not a natural object given by the God, given by the history. It is a very soft material like clay which you can mold into something. Not to put you in the spotlight, Patum, I honestly thought, what if a font like yours, that you could do multilingual communication, was implemented in Sri Lanka in 1940, because also it's equal to that, right? So that's when I realized, okay, nations are not natural objects given by the history, but it has a certain constructed element. You could do things with it, right? And then at the same time, the continuum part, when Turkey decided to implement this policy, they make a story claiming Turkey has been the oldest language in the world, first one in the world, and everything else are descendant from their language, and current modern Turkey language is the closest descendant of that language, right? So it's a typical propaganda, you know, like telling that is our language is the most purest language, but like nobody cannot claim it that it is not, because the continuum nature of the thing, right? Like, okay, you could trace things metamorphed into old versions, that you could safely claim that it is an old language, right? And then the third part, the flawed nature of modern nation structure, right? Modern nations needs to be purified, which means you need to have a proper identity, proper language, proper religion, clear-cut blocks in the nation. So this is what happened in Turkey. During my trip, I went to one of abandoned Greek village. So there are like around 1,000 houses abandoned in that village. Happens to be Greek Christian village, but in modern Turkey, when it is purified as this is the Turkish nation, this is the Turkish religion, and this is the Turkish language, anyone who's outside that box cannot live within the country. Right? There have been a lot of genocides, and there have been a large population exchange happening in Turkey between Greek and Turkey in order to purify the nation. So this is the flawed nature of modern shape. So it cannot hold complex communities. You clear cut things, and as a result you need to remove things, make boundaries. So this is how I internalize the nature of modern nation, right? So which goes into the fourth insight of my flow, which means if it is a construction, if it is a continuum, and if it is the current shape is flowed, we should think its form very carefully. So therefore I slightly update my questions, telling instead of asking to design what is the shape of the nation, what should be the shape of the nation, right? So in that way you could, because it's construction, you could think alternatively if you want, right? So now I will pose a series of questions based on that, and perhaps if something is happening in your head because of these questions, as Pathum said, like you could use that sticky notes and write a note, what is your ideal shape of the nation, right? So to begin with, why do we act as if nations are natural objects when they behave more like unstable prototypes? If you really think, what we are now in as Sri Lankan is a very unstable prototype that built in a rush around early 1920s, 30s, 40s, and a lot of iteration could be happen, right? So do not treat it as a natural object that is inherited from the time, but think of it like a prototype, right? You could do things, iterate it. The other question is, what form of life get purified out of the picture when we draw the national shape in a single unified line, right? So like Turkey, we need to draw a line for our nation, right? Whatever the nation you are building. So when you are drawing that hard line, the problem of modernity is it needs to be purified. Okay, I cannot speak two languages at the same time. If it is Sinhalese, that have to be Sinhalese. If it is Tamil, it have to be Tamil. And then you either put it into this box or that box. That is the main symptom of modernity, right? So when you are thinking the shape of a nation, think when you draw that, what happened to that otherness? The way you draw creates an otherness. I want to think about it. I want you to think about it. And then, if modernity perfects separation, how can a nation shaped by its logic ever hope to hold together, right? So once you purified, okay, this is what it means to be a Tamil, this is what it means to be a Sinhalese, this is what it means to be a Moor. You purify everything. How that largely purified things supposed to work together, right? So for instance, there is one of interesting community closer to Chilaw. So if in modern terms, if you look at them, they might fall into a Sinhalese category, but they are more fluent in Tamil, believe in multiple gods, which is really a problem for modern purification, because our modern purification doesn't allow that complexity, right? So same like that, having that purification doesn't allow us to assemblage a better nation, right? So, and then the word unity often used with this modern concept of nation building. So if you think of the process, what you do is you purify smaller blocks within the country and then expect to work in unity. It's like sort of contradiction, right? The same thing about the drawing. So when you draw the shape of a nation, how many other shapes disappears in order to be fit? Same like what Ataturk did. The Ataturk drew the Turkish nation, which cannot hold Anatolian Christians, Christian Armenians, Greek Christians, so which you cannot hold that shape, right? So then, what are the interactions we make with the nation? So if it is a service design, you would approach it like whom and with what you are interacting with, right? In order to do a better design. Same goes for this one. If you want to design the nation, you need to find out the traces, all the human and non-human actors which is part of that nation before thinking about what is designing. And the most important one is the word plurality, right? So you think about a nation shape not in modern terms, more in postmodern or non-modern approach, I would say, to have the capacity, affordances of holding the plurality, right? Can you think of a shape, such a shape that it could fit multiple shapes? Or a different analogy, a metaphor that would describe, okay, nation is something like that. So instead of telling nation is something like a square which force everyone else to be a square, can you come up with a different term, a different metaphor that helps to think better the complexity of the nation, right? So those are my simple set of questions, maybe not simple, right? So when Muniak and Patum put forward designing our nation, I want you to ask them back and ask you to think, to design what is the shape of a nation and what should be the shape of the nation, ideal scenario. So if you remember, like if you think it's a construction, so you could play around it. It's not hard as that you think, it's soft like a clay, but it's a continuum. There should be certain parts coming from the history, metamorphing into new things. And remember, the current shape is faulty. So you need to do a better design. So if that is the case, what would be the ideal shape? That is the question that I want to put forward among the other questions that I showcase. So that is the end, and I'm happy to have a chat or anything around this idea, because dialogue is what is most important. Or else, if you feel like drawing what is the ideal shape or the metaphor of the nation, please use that and draw it and stick on it, so we can have a nice collection of ideas about what is the ideal nation, shape of the nation. Thank you very much.